Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second virtual tour of our Bixby Marshland. Because of COVID concerns, we've suspended actual tours, but typically the first Saturday of the month from 8 to noon, Bixby Marshland is open to the public. But because of we've been trying to help slow the spread, stop the spread of COVID, we've gone to these virtual tour, and I hope you appreciate or enjoy these tours. And today we have two naturalists, Kim Moore and Al Sattler, who are both experts on the creatures and plants that live in the marshland. Let's tell you a little bit about my agency. My name is Basil Hewitt. I'm an engineer with Los Angeles County Sanitation District. And as you see on this map here, this is a map of LA County, and we serve 5.6 million people in LA County, or 78 cities. And you see the highlighted areas. These are the areas served by the sanitation districts. We have 11 wastewater treatment plants, and we treat about 400 million gallons of sewage every day in our 11 treatment plants, enough sewage to fill the Rose Bowl 4 or 5 times a day. Today, we're going to focus on our first and our largest treatment plant, called the Joint Water Pollution Control Plant in Carson. This plant that you see outlined in melony colors, as you see my cursor going around, it occupies 400 acres. 400 acres, and it's when you go north on the 110 freeway, as you get to the Sepulveda exit, look to your right and you'll see the Joint Water Pollution Control Plant. This plant's been there since 1928. This is our first treatment plant, and this treatment plant serves 78 cities in LA County. And this location was chosen because this is a low point in LA County. So if you look at the topography of LA County, when it rains, the flow, gravity flows overland and it winds up in this area. So historically, this whole area was a marshland, a wetland, but because of development, that marshland has shrunk. And marshlands are critical habitat because you get all kinds of species, and also they work as kidneys for our water quality, in terms of they clean water that may have collected pollutants in terms of the runoff. So this treatment plant is a low point. 200 acres of that treatment plant provides wastewater treatment. The other 200 acres, we've turned it into buffer property so people don't build homes or apartments right next to the treatment process. Some of the buffer property are ballparks. We've turned them into ballparks that are used by the kids in the local community for soccer and softball. But we also have 17 acres that we call Bixby Marshland. And we're going to show you the next, and we have rehabilitated that marshland, and that's going to be the focus of this morning's virtual tour. This is what Bixby Marshland looked like in 1995. As we were expanding or upgrading our treatment plant, one of the things that we wanted to do is to rehabilitate, rejuvenate Bixby Marshland. This is what it looked like in 1995. It had a lot of invasive species of plants and so on. So the community, we wanted to turn this into an asset to the community. And so what we did is we went through a restoration of Bixby Marshland, and we pulled out all the non-native plant. We put in landscaping, and we worked with a firm to help us revegetate and turn this back into its natural or original state. And these are the actual drawings that were used to develop Bixby Marshland, provided by the firm that helped us develop the plan to rehabilitate Bixby Marshland. We're going to use this drawing to step us through the tour. Al and Kim are going to step us through different regions of the tour. We're going to first look at the coastal sage scrub and boardwalk area of the marshland. And as we go through each section of this schematic, we'll have some short video clips. And right after the video clips, Al and Kim will describe the flora or fauna that occurs in that area. So let's go to the first video clip. So here's a video clip of that first area, and in the back, notice the digesters, and you see some of the. And this is what it looks like. You see the willow and so on, and these creatures, these plants, Al and Kim will talk about after this short clip close. This yellow flower that you see here, Al and Kim will talk more about it. So just keep in mind what you see in this region.
We're obviously not close to each other except by electronics here. So this is a closer picture of the mule fat. It's in the same family as the sunflower. If you look at the white flowers over on the right, you can see they are little, they are flower heads there, the white flowers. And this is a closer picture. You can see that the fluff here makes it look like a dandelion. So you can see somewhat more of the familiarity to one of the composite flowers. And this is the California sagebrush. It is actually relative to the Great Basin sagebrush, which grows, you know, in the Great Basin more or less all the way from the Sierras over the Colorado Mountains. And it is another composite or sunflower family, aster. And closer picture, you can see the flowers. And another picture closer yet, you can see the beautiful little flowers there. And birds like the seeds when it becomes more ripe. Oh, and you can even see some spider webs in there. Very nice picture, Kim. And closer up picture of the Encelia. You can see it does look a lot like a sunflower. Well, call it a sunflower, bush sunflower. And it is another characteristic plant of our coastal sage community here in Southern California.
This is a red-tailed hawk, and you may see them flying all around LA. They're very common in our area. And they often see them perch on lampposts above the freeway or in the freeway entrances. A lot of people see these and they know it's a red-tailed hawk because of the obvious red tail, but juveniles don't have that red tail. They're one of our common raptors, and they like to perch on those and hunt from those snags that we saw. Red-shouldered hawk is another one of our common raptors. They like wooded areas. You don't see those in your urban areas as much. I mean, they're in our parks, but they aren't going to be like in your backyard unless you have a heavily wooded backyard or near there. Most of the time, you're going to be seeing the red-tailed hawks soaring over. One of the smallest falcon is the American kestrel, and these love the snags in Bixby wetlands. This one happens to have a Bada's pocket gopher. Bada pocket gophers live in areas where they disturb the soil, and that disturbed soil is good for plant growth for certain types of plants. These small falcons will also eat dragonflies, grasshoppers, mantids, lizards. So they're a top predator in the bird world. Here we're going to continue on from that high point, and we're going to take a walk over the boardwalk, and hopefully I'll get it right this time with the video.
So we'll be seeing a variety of trees here. This is a small cottonwood that's been planted, and let's see what else we have. And actually, you can see some.
Sorry, it's not behaving the way it was.
Okay, and down below you actually you can see a number of grasses. A number of species of native grasses were planted there, and don't ask me to ID them by and large. And there on the left now, you see the beautiful trunk of one of our sycamores. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Sycamores are another plant that likes to be somewhat damp. They make a beautiful tree in your yard if you have enough room for them. They'll grow over 100 feet tall. And you see a sycamore sapling there. And a pine. This is the Torrey pine. It's not actually native to this area. It's from down San Diego County. You may have heard of Torrey Pines State Park, but that is such a restricted area that they decided to bring some up here just to expand its range in case something happens down there. And it seems to have been doing pretty well, actually. You know, that once a tree got established, you know, some of them were not happy having their roots so wet, but the rest of them are doing fine.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, you know, the cottonwood. Cottonwood is another tree that can grow over 100 feet tall. It's actually related to, well, if you look at the leaves, they look a little bit like an aspen. They will kind of quake around in the breeze like an aspen leaves. And closer up of the sycamore, you can see the beautiful bark there and the large leaves and the seed pods there, and the larger picture of the seed pods, and the leaves will be kind of felty on the back and shiny on the top. Beautiful pictures, Kim.
Thank you.
The Torrey pine, you can see, you know, well, obviously you can see the small pine cone there. As I think I pretty much talked about that.
Okay, now we're going to head down the pathway, getting closer to the water, but we're on what we call the riparian path. A riparian environment is an environment that grows along the edges of a watercourse or a waterway. And in this case, it would have been a stream or that was probably leading into where this whole area connects into Wilmington Drain, that then leads into Lake Machado, and then eventually out into the harbor. Okay.
Another pan from another viewpoint there. You can see a willow tree, branch hanging down there. And again, and the tules in the distance. And more of the sagebrush here. And above that, you can actually see some grape plants that are hanging over the trees. Those grape plants were not planted there. Birds carried the seeds over from some grape plants that were planted there that you'll be seeing later on. And there you see a couple of pines in the distance. There's a little bit of buckwheat in there. We'll show a picture of that later. And you see lemonade berry there. That's just to the left of the pathway. We're coming around to be looking at there in the distance there, you can see a gazebo that we'll look at a little more.
Oh,
And, oops, okay.
sorry.
Well, yeah.
There we are. This is the lemonade berry.
And more of the sagebrush and lemonade berry, which is another plant that likes the coastal sage that you see in the coastal sage community. And come on. And the purple sage, this trimmed back a little bit. Okay, picture of the willow. We've got 4 different species of willows here. Maybe in another session, we'll talk more about the willows. But here you see the willow getting, reproducing itself. It produces a lot of seeds that with fluff on them that'll blow away in the wind, so it'll have itself established elsewhere. And here you see the catkins more in detail with the seed fluff there. Lemonade berry is, another, we showed lemonade berry briefly before. The berries have a rather tart covering on them. It gets its name from being able to put a few of those berries into a glass of water and it'll taste like lemonade. this will grow to maybe 25 or 30 feet tall if you really give it a chance. And it makes a very nice plant in the garden. Laurel sumac is another plant of the area.
Laurel sumac is in one of the first plants to respond after a fire and to grow.
And purple sage is another very characteristic plant of the coastal sage community. It's blooming very nicely now in wild areas, beautiful purple expanses. If you see a purple plant in driving through wild coastal sage communities, that's probably this plant. And you can see the structure there with the seed heads, with the flower heads, when those are past blooming and developing the seeds, their function as bird feeders. The seeding birds really like those seeds. And a somewhat larger picture of a purple sage plant.
This is an orange crown warbler. When we were in the marshland the other day, it's a little bit quieter out there right now, because at this season, a lot of the migratory birds have gone through, and those are up in the mountains where they're nesting. And we don't have our winter waterfowl here. And our local birds, our resident birds, such as this orange crown warbler, are in the marshland, and they're either singing for mates. So a lot of birding is done by ear. And these are some of the birds that we heard when we were there. And the orange crown warbler will be singing, but they're also nesting there. And so when they're actually on their nests, they're a lot quieter. Many warblers pass through in the spring and in the fall. So that's one of the things that's really nice about going to the marsh over and over again, is you really get that feeling of seasonality. You have different plants that are blooming and different birds that are singing based on the seasons. We have over 104 species of birds have been recorded at the wetlands in eBird. I don't know how many people know about eBird. It's an online resource that a lot of our birders use. This is a yellow warbler. Yellow warblers are quite a lot of them right now, right around our marshes. They actually spend their winters in South America, and then they come up here into our area, and they'll be having their nests in our area. These warblers, as well as many other birds, eat insects. And so you can see on the vegetation, there's often insects that are associated with different types of plants. So these birds are gleaning the insects off the bottoms of the leaves. And I just love to watch the behavior of birds. I think a lot of people enjoy watching the birds. Yellow warblers are associated with wetlands habitats. So if you have a yard that's in the mountains, you're probably not going to see too many yellow warblers. But if you're around the wetlands like here or Harbor Lake, you're going to see these birds and hear them. This is a baby that has recently hatched, a fledgling yellow warbler. It doesn't have its yellow color yet because it's trying to blend in and be a little bit more drab. One thing I love about baby birds is what I call bird lips, which is over here. They always have this little yellow gape until their beaks grow in, until they mature. I just love little birds. This is a western tiger swallowtail. We have a lot of butterflies in our area, but these ones are particularly associated with marshlands and riparian areas because the plants that they use for having their young, where they lay their eggs, is on plants like the willows and the sycamores and the cottonwoods that are all around a marshland. So when we have our urban development, if we don't have those plants, we can't have these butterflies. But fortunately, we are trying to save and preserve these little pockets of green for them. They lay their eggs individually on the undersides of these leaves. So you'll see them, if you're out there and you do see a butterfly, see if its abdomen is tipped under, because if its abdomen is tipped under, it's actually laying an egg. Al?
Oh, right. Okay. So this is California buckwheat eriogonum. There are several species of eriogonum here in California. As you can see, there are abundant flowers on the buckwheat. Insects just love these. When the flowers are out there, you'll see and hear insects all over them getting the pollen. Bees of several different species. This is a non-native plant that happens to be there in the marsh. Non-native plants are, well, this is a wildlife refuge that was established to have native plants and animals. And non-native plants can sometimes crowd out native plants, and sometimes have no habitat value for animals. So we do not really like having non-native plants in there, and try to keep them out. Bush monkey flower. There are several species of monkey flower around. Some like shady areas. Sticky monkey flower likes somewhat drier, warmer areas. Typically, you'll find it up in chaparral.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting thing that we did when Al and I were going through this. We were looking at the names of the flowers and trying to figure out what was planted there. Al provided the list of the original plant list that was done from the surveys from 2009 and 2010. And so we were trying to sync up our pictures with the names. And there have been a lot of taxonomy changes, even since 2009 and 2010. With the use of DNA, you can change, they really understanding the relationships between plants a lot better. So this was one that has many different common names, the orange bush monkey flower or sticky monkey flower. And then the scientific name has also changed over time as they do more research and understand the relationship between the plants better.
So,
Go ahead.
why don't we pause here for a sec? Just kind of, there have been a couple chat questions coming in asking about the water source for the marsh and such. We might as well talk about the hydrology a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's the perfect time.
Okay.
One of the questions was, does water from the joint plant, the treatment plant, go to the marsh? And the answer would be no. All the water in the marsh comes from the nearby storm drain. So that's that water. Some of that water is routed through the marsh. It's cleaned by the marsh, and then what doesn't evaporate or used by the, it comes out of the marsh back into the storm drain much cleaner than it came in. So it does two things. It creates habitat, also helps clean some of our storm water.
Yeah. And the inlet comes, if you look down at the bottom kind of left part of the, where the water is there, that's the inlet where water comes in from the storm drain. It's pumped, and then it flows around.
Point that out. Could we
right about there, about where the cursor was, there. And then water flows around, being treated by the wetland like kidneys, and then it flows out over off the map, over by some railroad tracks, and goes back into the storm drain there.
And you can see
when the storm drain was established, there was concern expressed that this would cut off the wetland, and somebody rather forcefully pointed out that Section 404 of the Clean Water Act says, "Thou shalt not drain wetlands," and so there was a settlement actually with the flood control district to have some water pumped into the wetland to keep it as a wetland. And as Basil was saying, the over years the wetland became greatly degraded, and that's when the sanitation district stepped in to upgrade the wetland and is now much better than it was.
There was also a question about monarch butterflies.
Yes.
Go ahead. Do they really lay eggs? Did you really say monarch? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that was that wasn't a monarch butterfly that I was showing. It was a western tiger swallowtail. But monarch butterflies also, actually, the life cycle of butterflies is that they lay eggs, and they lay eggs on a host plant. The plants and the butterflies have kind of co-evolved together, so that monarch butterflies like milkweed plants, those in the milkweed family. The western tiger swallowtail that I showed likes trees in the riparian area like the willows and sycamores. So they'll only lay their eggs on specific plants. But they lay an egg, and after they lay an egg, the egg hatches and it becomes a caterpillar. The caterpillar, in the case of many insects, you have what's called complete metamorphosis, where it goes from egg to the larva form, and we have different names of the larva for the different insects. We call them caterpillars, or for beetles, we call them grubs. For flies, you may call them, oh, I forgot what the name is for that. But anyway, they have a different name for the larval form, and then they become a pupa. And that pupa is what we call a chrysalis in the case of a butterfly. A lot of people talk about moths having a cocoon. A cocoon is just the wrapping around the chrysalis. And then they emerge from that chrysalis to become the adult butterfly, the reproductive part of the butterfly. So they have those 4 stages.
There's another question from Kathy. Her question: do toxics build up in the soil of wetlands over time when it cleans the water going through it?
Well, one part of the question would be that when rain comes through, this can be pretty much flush with a whole lot of rainwater. I've seen it being filled to the level of where the inlet and outlet are for the storm drain, and that undoubtedly cleans it pretty thoroughly each winter when there's heavy rain. Plants and animals seem to be thriving there. So I guess you could consider that a bioassay, and we'll show some pictures later on of bird families that have hatched and grown up there. I'm giving you a cheater question, ahead of time.
Yeah, and also emphasize that we have to do all our part to make sure oils and things don't spill upstream or up gradient, because at some point it's going to wind up in our waterway. So yeah, we all have to do our part to make sure stuff doesn't wind up in the storm drain.
You know, when I visit wetlands and I visit natural areas, often I see a lot of the runoff and the trash from the streets collected in there, so that even if you know, you have an area like this that's kind of pristine and clean, or they try to be, but where you don't have as much protection or as many people caring for it on a regular basis, any, you know, trash that you see from the street, all of that gets collected in the reeds and in the marshes and does affect it. But that's the idea of a wetland, is it helps clean the water before it goes and enters into the ocean.
Yeah.
All right. So if I think there are no more questions right now, we can continue.
Well, I just wanted to go back for a sec.
Okay.
Come to think of it, I've never seen plastic bags coming into there. No, I don't know whether there's an adequate grating coming in from the storm drain or what, but I've not seen plastic bags coming through there.
And I haven't been to Bixby as much, and I haven't seen anything there. But in some of the other wetland habitats, that I do see that, where you have runoff. So maybe this one is it may be developed a little bit better, but things from streets do get into our wetlands and our watercourses.
Thank you.
Okay, our next area is we're going to walk this short area of pathway to our arbor and then just to the bridge. So we'll try the video again.
So you see another one of the Torrey pines there on the left and some willows. And you see the pathway to the bridge. We'll be heading along that in a minute. And there's a, oh, come on, Kim.
That's the curly dock.
Yeah, which we'll talk about in a sec. And there in the middle, you see coyote bush, which is another backrus, very common in much of California, and our grape arbor. When the facility was built, they took some of the non-native eucalyptus trees that had been there, and engineers like to build things, reduce, reuse, recycle. So they used those to build a couple of shade structures, and grapevines, desert grape, are growing over them. When it's hot, that's a very nice shady place to be.
Oh, what happened? Jumps ahead.
And you see the yellow tape? That's probably marking off a place where a bird nest has been found. Department of Fish and Wildlife does surveys here from time to time.
Okay.
Very good.
So,
Oh, there we go. Here's the arbor.
okay, yeah. So close up of the grape here, desert wild grape. This, isn't really quite from this area, but it grows here quite well. So, and the grapes are growing, still green at this point. The birds really like them. Over the course of the summer, you'll see the grapes ripen and then start disappearing. And by the end of summer, almost all the grapes will be gone. You can hardly find a single one there. And they are small, they're really seedy, they're very tart. So it's not something that you'll be likely to pick and eat many of. For a tour, I sometimes invite somebody to try one. Kim?
Okay, this is another one of our non-native species. A lot of non-native species, whether it's plants or animals, we're in a port area. So many of them come in through shipments in ports. Some of them are introduced intentionally, and some of them come in accidentally. And you also have transport from natural change of habitat and range. This one is particularly grows in areas of disturbed soil. This is a non-native, and it's at the edges of roadsides. So wherever you have disturbed soils where human activity is, you're going to more likely have this spring up. And I think Basil, you had talked about maintaining the non-natives.
Yeah, every year we come in and we prune out non-natives because it's a never-ending battle to make sure we maintain the native habitat. So the non-natives can be pretty aggressive. That Al probably knows more about it. So every year we come in and we do some maintenance to remove non-natives.
Yeah, and actually I'd say there is a trained professional work crew that comes here that have been trained to recognize natives and non-natives. I've talked with them a couple of times in the many times I've been out there. And one time I was pointing to them and they said, okay, let's get a sample of this and go back and check to see whether or not we should be removing this. And when you think about it, this is, when it turns out this is very much a maintained, managed wetland. We no longer have floods coming through, wiping things out. We no longer have deer or pronghorn antelope, or I don't think there are even many rabbits there. We don't have grizzly bears coming through, churning up from time to time. So without all of that, it has to be managed by humans. If we had some deer in the area, it'd look rather different. But
So,
17 acres is not enough.
okay.
This is California wild rose, and on it you see a syrphid fly. That's what's, these roses were blooming when we were out there, so I took this picture of this fly. These syrphid flies, or flower flies, or hover flies as they're sometimes called, are sometimes called bee mimics because they mimic in coloration bees. There's something called Mullerian mimicry and Batesian mimicry, where the one insect will mimic another one. Now, it's not something where this fly said, "Oh, I'm going to go mimic a bee," but over time they've developed along with bees, so that the ones that had these black and yellow stripes on them, they survive pretty well because the birds are less likely to eat them if they think that it's a bee. So that's kind of a protective mimicry that goes in these. So a lot of people will see these and say, "Oh, it's a bee," but they're actually a fly. This one is a bee. This is a yellow-faced bumblebee. When we think of bees, often we think of the honeybee. That's what everyone thinks of. Those are not native to our area. They were brought over from Europe and from Asia or Africa. They were brought over to pollinate our crops. When people came over and brought the crops from Europe, they also brought over bees to help pollinate them. But we have, there's only about 7 species of those social bees and only one of that honeybee in our area. But there are over 1,500 species of bees in California. And we often don't talk about all the others. This one happens to be a bumblebee, so people are familiar with bumblebees, and we've got quite a few species of those. Most of them are not social the way the other bees are with the hives, but they're solitary, and they live in the ground, and they make their chambers digging into the ground or digging into wood one at a time.
So this is a picture of the blue elderberry. Elderberries like to also have their roots somewhat damp. There are a number of elderberry plants actually wind up being small trees there at the marsh. A couple more pictures. And then obviously, Kim, what is the insect on there?
Oh, that's another syrphid fly.
Okay.
Another little fly that's hiding in there.
Okay. And another picture of the flowers. They are in bloom now, and they're starting to produce the berries also. The birds really like these berries also. If you look, there are already a number of gaps on this cluster of berries. There was one time I was going out there to try to take pictures of ripe berries, and I couldn't find a single cluster of ripe berries because they'd all been eaten by the birds already. So, yeah.
So we'll continue our tour now. We're going to go to the next area, which is this marshland and open water area.
And on tours, I try to have the tour group approach this bridge very, very quietly and hope that we'll see some birds, wild birds out there on the water and not have them fly away right away. You can see there are tules surrounding the open waterway here. Picture quality not that great because of compression. And this is actually how it looks right now. The water's been drawn down some. There's some algae and some duckweed covering much of the surface. And again, you can see the tules around the margin. It's a great place for birds to take shelter, build nests, and if you remember seeing the map, on both sides of the bridge, there are waterways. The water's flowing through, or well, very, very slowly flowing through. And a picture of the bulrushes or tules. Actually, there are 3 different species of tules that have been planted at the marsh. This is the largest one. Birds really like the seed heads, and Native Americans use the tules for a number of different purposes. And you might even remember the story of Moses and the bulrushes. Tules and bulrushes are found in much of the globe, much of the earth, and have been used by humans for thousands of years.
That's another one of our marshland plants that are in an environment with a lot of water. We also have a lot of swallows. Swallows eat insects that are flying over waterways and over fields. This is a barn swallow. It's got those long streaming tails, but there are a number of other types of swallows in our area, including northern rough-winged swallows and tree swallows that you might see. And then also swifts, which are not as closely related to swallows, but that are up there also.
One time I was out there to take pictures, and I was very surprised to see this family of geese right there. And you can see the goslings are not yet ready to fly. So obviously they'd been raised right here in the marsh. And when I saw that, I said, it's very clearly a sign that the marsh is working. It's they're able to raise their young here. So that was, go ahead.
I was going to say waterfowl, such as the Canada geese and mallards, which is on the next slide, migrate. They have a large migration, and they spend their winters in our area, but then they migrate north for the summer. But over time, with our lawns that we have and human habitation, we actually providing food sources of grasses and things. So we find more and more of the populations of the Canada geese and the mallards are starting to nest here. So they're actually changing their patterns, their migration patterns. So we still do have a lot of Canada geese that still migrate north, and you might notice in spring and particularly fall, you'll hear them, particularly at night when they're migrating. They make a lot of noise flying over your house. But we do have some now that are resident, have become more permanent residents here.
Yeah, especially downstream from here, there are a number of Canada geese that have taken up residence at Kanawha Harbor Regional Park. And I think partly just because they get a lot of free handouts from people.
Yes. There's a lot of other waterfowl that we actually see coming to Bixby Marsh, but we can't show them to you now because it's summertime, and they're going up north to the lakes in Canada and the northern lakes of the United States and into Canada to breed. So they're out of here right now, but come back in winter. You got to see the marsh in winter when the other waterfowl are back here for their wintering habitat, or by migrating through. And we were lucky enough to see this mama mallard on the water. The other ones that you saw were male mallards. This is a female mallard with her babies. And I will play another little video. Right now, there are mallard chicks out in most of our ponds and waterways. Another bird that we see is one of our herons. This is the black-crowned night heron. People often see the great blue herons. They're called night herons because they're out at night. We were out there early in the morning, and you occasionally see them during the day, but they're much more active at night. The herons that we do see during the day are those great blue herons, and I'm sure that many of you have seen a great blue heron and called out, "It's a crane." They're not cranes, but that's what they remind people of. And we have great egrets and snowy egrets, and green herons are some of the herons in our area. These will make trees, their nests in trees, high in the trees, particularly around the harbor, in the palm trees and some of the other tall trees around the harbor. I've seen them down in the Wilmington area, and they have a tree that's filled with heron nests. And underneath the tree, you'll find all this scat from the herons. But if you look up where there's scat below, that's where all the herons and their heron babies are.
In other words, don't park your car into those nests.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is a song sparrow, and that's the song sparrow's song. This time of year, we are now having birds that are still calling for the mates, the ones that are not already on nests. They're singing, and spring is a great time for birders, because one of the ways that we find birds or enjoy birds is by the song. And every bird has unique songs. They have songs, and then they also have calls. The calls are these little chips, you know, peep, peep here and there, but the songs are what we love, bird songs. You'll hear those in the spring when they're calling for their mates and in courtship and looking for them. The rest of the year, you're probably not hearing them sing as much, but you're hearing them with calls where they have making contact calls with the family members and other birds. So it's getting a little quiet out there now because, as I said, the migratory birds are gone through, and also many of these birds are sitting on their nests. But if you go out there right now to the marsh, you're going to be hearing this bird singing. Also, you hear a lot of common yellowthroats. Common yellowthroats are singing, and they're year-round residents. The song sparrow, this one, they're year-round residents, and they're making their nests for the yellowthroats. They're making them in the reeds, and the song sparrows in the ground and in the grasses, low to the ground. We were also very fortunate when we were out there this time. Al spotted them, I think. These dragonflies. These are flame skimmer dragonflies. There are different types of dragonflies, but these ones are particularly beautiful because of their bright orange color. What some people, people know that birds migrate, and people know that monarch butterflies migrate. But there's other species of butterflies that migrate, and also some dragonflies migrate. They migrate great distances, but they don't know as much about the migration of dragonflies because people haven't studied it as much. With the birds, it's easier to track where they go, and with the butterflies, they track the migration of butterflies by actually tagging the wings. But people don't do that as much with dragonflies, so there's still a lot to be learned about dragonfly migrations. We talked about the butterfly life cycle earlier, that you have the egg, the larva, the chrysalis, and then, or the pupa, and then the adult butterfly. Well, dragonflies have a slightly different life cycle where they have an egg and then a nymph, and then the nymph becomes a dragonfly. They skip that, that stage, that metamorphosis stage. But they, immature ones live in the water. They can live for several years in the water before they become the reproductive adult. When they become the reproductive adult, that's their purpose, is to find a mate and lay eggs and start the cycle all over again. But for all the ones that you see above the water, over the past couple of years, there may have been many of them in the water, and they need a clean running water source in order to lay their eggs and to reproduce. And so that's the male and the female. That's the male flame skimmer. They're so beautiful. There's a lot of groups now that are doing dragonfly watches, the way people watch butterflies and the way they watch birds. And that's the female. You can see she's a little bit duller in color. And the beautiful venation on the wings. And that's how you can tell different species of dragonflies apart, often the coloration, but also the venation on the wings. We also saw this little Allen's hummingbird sitting in the reeds out there. Allen's hummingbirds have a little cup-like nest. And then if you walk past the bridge a little further, you'll see really this dense vegetation area. And this is where you'll find birds' nests in here, and birds such as these bush tits. You may have seen these in your yard. They fly in flocks, and you have these fairly large flocks of birds. It can be from like 8 to 20 birds at a time. And they flit out one at a time, and then another small group, and then another small group, and they're eating all the insects on the leaves in the plants. And this is what their nest looks like. It's this long sock, and it's made up of the plants that are around them. So they use bits of plants and fluff, and they will have a whole group of baby birds inside there. And while they're doing that, suddenly you say, where did all the bush tits go? I haven't seen any bush tits. And that's because they're pairing off and mating and tending to their nests. And so you may see 1 or 2 bush tits until they, the eggs hatch. And then you'll see another family of bush tits come out and fly away in their large groups.
Kim, Leslie has a question. Leslie,
Yep.
Unmute yourself and ask your question. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, sorry, I was wondering, the amount of algae and duckweed in the water, is that a problem, or is that pretty natural? Should there be, you know, that much? And that's it. Thanks.
Who wants to take that? Algae and duckweed in the water.
But I'm not sure what to say. The duckweed, of course, is one of our native plants, the smallest plant we have around. You know, as you saw, the birds seem to cope with it. From time to time, and in drought in particular, there's no water coming in from the storm drain, or sometimes they shut off the pumps to let the level go down in order to cut the tules back so that the mosquito fish can get in to make sure they get all the mosquito larvae. But I'm not in touch. I don't know what the management of the marshland is currently about whether or not they're turning the water off. There are times when the water level is much lower than what you saw there, and it's not very aesthetic. But
Yeah, I'm not an expert at all in anything, but particularly in terms of water quality and duckweed. But I do know that in a healthy water ecosystem, you do have to have some water flow, and algae is taking up nutrients and oxygen, and that the balance has to be right for a healthy environment. I don't know what the level is, particularly here at the marshland.
I mean, we do know the marshland is healthy and there is a flow through it. And like Al says, in times of, if there's not a lot of water in the storm drain, it'll dry out a little bit because the water source is the local storm drain, the nearby storm drain. All right, thank you.
I know that from visiting, I visit a lot of parks, and I visit a lot of wetlands, and I visit a lot of places around LA and some of the small pockets of green that we have and urban parks. And I will say the Bixby marshland is a very clean, beautiful place to see. There are other beautiful places too, but this one does seem to be quite beautiful and maintained well.
Thank you.
And there's some discussion about having some water quality studies actually done there as a class. So.
And there are, our lab does analyze on a regular basis the water coming in, the water coming out. And so that is an ongoing activity. So good. Kim?
Okay. So I think that's where we are at the questions stage.
Thank you. Any questions? Raising your hand and we can unmute you, or you can enter it through the chat or the Q&A.
Hopefully we've inspired you to go out and see the wetlands, but you can see nature anywhere you are. You don't have to be specifically in the wetlands, but this is a very nice place to visit. And as I said, see it in all the different seasons, see the seasonality and the changes in it too.
Al, do you want to add anything?
Well,
Hey, Basil, we had a question in the Q&A, and
Oh.
maybe you can address it to everyone here. They asked, Alexander says, "Hi, I'm an incoming college freshman who was interested in this type of field. Are there any volunteer opportunities at the Bixby Marsh?"
Yes, and Genesis could even answer that. Let the world see you, Genesis. Yeah, we are always looking for docents to help us at the Marsh. Al and Kim are two of our, Al is, I think, our first docent ever. And he's been a docent at the Marsh for a number of years. Everything you'd ever want to know about the Marsh, you know, well, in terms of the plants, Al's your guy. So we're always looking for docents.
Yeah, so our Bixby's, it's primarily run by docents like Al and Kim. So
I'm actually not a docent there. I'm a friend of a docent, but that's okay.
You're a docent right
yeah,
now.
who's volunteering her time right now. And so if you're interested, you can definitely shoot me an email, Alexander, or just type your email into the chat, and we'll reach out to you privately on getting the whole training process started and answer any other questions about the Bixby Marsh that you may have.
yeah. I have to say, in the course of being a docent here, I have learned a lot, in particular about local plants here. One of the things they recommended for docents coming in is a book called Flora of the Santa Ana River and Environs by Oscar Clark. And of course, there are many other guides to plants and animals of the area, but this one I think is especially well written. A lot of great pictures and explanation for amateurs. And you know, I knew Oscar Clark. He did a couple of lectures that I had seen. So
I'm going to stop
And we have-
sharing here just to go back to the view of everybody, because I think we were done with the presentation, but we can continue the question and answer area.
We have another question from Jim Stewart asking, when will it be open? Maybe Basil, you can answer that.
That's a question beyond my pay grade. I mean, what I would say is that we want to make sure when we open it, it's safe for everyone, our staff and our folks. And it's been consistent with us trying to follow the health officials' guidelines in terms of making sure because we can have crowds. We used to have crowds sometimes of 10, 12, 30 people at the Marshland. So when we get the all safe, we will have it open.
And we will let you know, right? We will.
Yeah, Al and Kim and Genesis were like a kid in a candy shop the other day when they were able to get the keys and get in there.
It's usually open every first Saturday of every month too. So when we do open again, you can expect it'll be on the first Saturday of every month, and we'll let you know. We'll post it all over social media, and we hope to see you there when we do. Another question we have from Richard Harmel is, any chance of getting a copy of the recording? We do have this presentation recorded. So if you're interested, we can definitely have that posted somewhere on the homepage of our website, and we can also reach out to you directly.
Yeah.
Oh.
Any other questions?
Actually, I'm scrolling up now that I'm back on the no longer sharing my screen. I can see some of the questions, and Cattell asked the panelists if it was a pale swallowtail. And it was a Western tiger swallowtail. We do have pale swallowtails in the area, but they're usually up in the mountain area, and they look a little bit different.
Any other questions? If not, I just want
Well,
to
Again, I just want to repeat what Genesis, what everybody else has said. When this is open again, we would be delighted to have you come visit. That's if you're close enough that you wouldn't be burning too much gas to get there. Otherwise, explore natural areas closer to where you live, and don't increase your carbon footprint by coming here. But again, we very much would welcome you. It's great every time of the year, and if you come, as Kim was saying, if you come several times during the year, you'll definitely see the seasons changing.
Leslie has a question. I'm gonna allow Leslie to ask her question. Leslie, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, it was kind of a follow-up. I got on late, so you may have already said this. The water coming in, it's stormwater. Is it cleaned up?
Yes, it's from the nearby storm drain, and as it's routed through the marshland, it gets clean. And what doesn't evaporate or utilized by the plant or percolate comes out the marsh, and it's much cleaner. And we have the laboratory testing. We've been doing that for years, and you can see the marsh is not only beautiful, but it also cleans the stormwater that's routed through the marsh.
So if there's like heavy metals or some other toxic stuff, that's not really a problem coming in?
We test for all those things, as we said earlier. That's where it's incumbent on all of us to protect the storm drain and runoff. And we try to do our part, but that's why, you know, this big push to clean up storm water. And I think Kim was talking about out a lot of marsh, you'll see the stuff people throw out of their, you know, cars or whatever, or don't pick up. So it's a community effort to make sure those things don't wind up in our storm drain, storm water, because whether it comes through the marsh or not, it's going to hit the waterways, the ocean, wherever. So it's a community effort.
So I will say there was one time in particular that I was out there, and as I remember, water was not coming in, and I inquired the engineers, and they said, yeah, there had been an oil spill somewhere upstream, and that they were catching that water rather than letting it flow down. So there is attention to this.
Yes. All right. If there are no other questions, Genesis, do you see any other questions? If not, I'd like to. Go ahead.
How does the marsh get its water during the dry time of the year?
We answered that question.
Can't answer that one. Yeah, and I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Kim.
It gets dry.
But Kim, Al, Genesis, thank you for a wonderful tour. We look forward to having you at the marsh when it's open. And next month, we will do the same thing. We'll have new content. We'll come up with new ways of sparking interest, love of the marsh, the creatures out there. And so hope to see you the first Saturday next month at 8 a.m. We will do this again with different content, but the same beautiful marshland. Have a great rest of the day and stay safe, and we will see you soon. Thank you all.